It's a pleasure to have you with us today. As one of the contributors to Core DAO and the veteran in the crypto space, with Bitcoin recently hitting a historical milestone and the Core pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the Bitcoin ecosystem, I think there's much to discuss today. So before we dive into the exciting innovations and developments around Core, let's start with your journey. Could you share a bit about your background and how you first got involved in the world of Bitcoin?
So I first got involved, well, first of all, really excited to chat here today. And then I got involved in Bitcoin back in 2013. I had actually heard about it back, I think in about 2011 from a college professor. He was, going heavy on it, and I didn't really understand money in a computer. I didn't take the time to, fully appreciate the white paper. By 2013, I think I read like a Hacker News post or something similar, and my mind was just blown. Like it totally clicked to me that we need to separate money and state. We need to have a non-sovereign store of value, an alternative to traditional financial system. And I was hooked. By the 2017 cycle, I was working full time in crypto. I found my way to Coinbase, where I led money movements engineering for 4 years, and then from Coinbase over to Core. And the real genesis behind Core was no one was scaling Bitcoin, and the initial contributors like myself have been in Bitcoin for a long time, recovering Bitcoin maxis, if you will. And the idea there is we had just drifted so far from what crypto originally meant, right? It meant decentralization. And 2017 cycle and then the 2021 cycle became really centralization at the expense of performance. And that trade-off just wasn't something that we thought, was really what crypto was meant to be. And we said, what's the most decentralized crypto asset? It's Bitcoin. Let's go out there and scale Bitcoin. And that's my journey and why we're here today.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's clear your belief in Bitcoin as a foundation for innovation has shaped your career, and we are quite similar. I learned crypto in 2014 and all in crypto to launch PANews in 2017. Yeah. So as we all know, this year marks a significant milestone for Bitcoin, surpassing the 100K. What do you think has driven Bitcoin's success?
So I think Bitcoin is now, quote unquote, too big to fail. 100,000 was a big milestone. I thought it was going to actually happen earlier. I was a bigger Bitcoin bull, I think, than most. And I'm certainly long on Bitcoin to at least the market cap of gold, if not further. But I think there's now the legitimacy of Bitcoin. It's now part of the traditional financial system. It's no longer just an alternative. And again, if you go back to that original, ethos, we veered quite a bit, but I think it's because now it is primarily just a store of value asset. I say just a store of value, but that is, $2 trillion of wealth that is now, totally outside or was totally outside of the traditional financial system, which is incredibly important. And it now is this perfect collateral asset that even nation states want to go create these strategic reserves of and want to borrow against. And I think that's the other, big theme is now the accessibility, where for, the first 15 years, of Bitcoin, there was many people that weren't able to go actually take positions in Bitcoin, whether it was due to regulations or custody. Like there were all these kind of hurdles that they couldn't really get over. And now anybody can go buy, the IBIT, BlackRock ETF and their retirement account or the PA. And I think that is really, net good for Bitcoin is that now the accessibility is really there. And Core is actually taking that to the next level where you can now access Bitcoin on faster, cheaper rails on a scaling solution like Core.
Yes. Yes. Well, I also think the approval of ETF feels like a watershed moment for Bitcoin. So let's talk about your motivation for building Core DAO. What inspires you to start building Core DAO?
Most people I know got into crypto at some point. Even if people switched into Ethereum or Solana, like Bitcoin was a common thread that most people, have experience with. And since the 2017 cycle and the block size wars, it's a slow, expensive, inflexible settlement layer, which is also what makes it great. Like it is so good at being a store value because it has all of those properties, but just be on the opposite core mission. The core mission is to onboard billions of people into Bitcoin. And we're, very early in that journey, but are very excited.
Yeah, yes, I think many Bitcoiners hold the same vision with you. That's why there's are so many projects in Bitcoin's ecosystem today. How would you describe Core DAO in a simple and understandable way to our Chinese readers?
So Core is really composed of two different pieces. One is the Bitcoin yield or Bitcoin staking product, and then the other is the Bitcoin EVM ecosystem on the other side. And on the EVM side, Core is the largest Bitcoin ecosystem. It's got 1 billion in TVL. It has hundreds of thousands of daily active users. There's a variety of dApps. There's over 100 dApps that are already live, and many that are coming later this year. And the idea is to be able to put your Bitcoin to work, to engage in Bitcoin DeFi. And that's opening up all these new use cases that you can't do on Bitcoin L1. You need faster, cheaper, more programmable rails. And that's where the EVM ecosystem comes in. And that so you can stake it, you can use it as gas, like kind of your classic, L1 mechanics, but with a Bitcoin denominated ecosystem. About 80 or 90% of the TVL on Core is all in Bitcoin. And then on the other side, you have this Bitcoin staking product. And the idea is for many, many Bitcoiners, they're not ready to get involved in full Bitcoin DeFi. Many of the Bitcoin folks miss DeFi generally, and now they're starting to catch up. And what these folks want to do is they want to earn passive yield. So they want to go stake their Bitcoin and they want to do it non-custodially. So they don't want multi-sigs. They don't want to have to worry about trust assumptions. They want it to be passive. And we brought the first Bitcoin staking product to the world in early April. And now there's about 800 million in Bitcoin earning this passive yield. In November, we announced dual staking, which is the next phase of that continuum, which is you can now take a position in Core as well to earn a higher yield on your Bitcoin. And this is kind of the gateway drug mentality, if you will, which is you start to get yield passively, then you start to be pseudo active by taking a position in Core. And then as time goes on, we'll get you hopefully more comfortable and we'll get some trustless bridging, et cetera, that will then get you into the Core ecosystem to go engage in Bitcoin DeFi. If you're already ready to go into that part of the continuum, 100% go do it. But for many people, it's really an educational exercise to go do it. But the theme of that whole story is put your Bitcoin to work, and Core is out there scaling Bitcoin.
Yeah, you mentioned the post dual staking feature has been implemented in the Fusion upgrade. But right now, there are many protocols want their holders to stake their Bitcoin. How do you persuade people to stake to Core? And for many Bitcoiners, security is their top concern. How does Core ensure security?
So security definitely is the top concern. And we tell everybody that before you get involved in Core or any other ecosystem that is offering any Bitcoin yield product, you have to understand the trust assumptions. You have to understand where the yield comes from. But if you can't easily explain those sorts of things, you should not partake. And I firmly believe that. I know too many friends that lost money in BlockFi, Genesis, Celsius. Giving up custody is just a total non-starter. And that's why Core, when it created its Bitcoin staking product, it was designed by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. And what we mean by that is it's fully non-custodial. So you time lock it to yourself. You're only trusting Bitcoin. And that was so critical to getting some of these partnerships done with BitGo, HexTrust, and others, where they wanted to make sure this actually has product market fit with Bitcoiners, not people that might just be coming out of these other staking assets like an Ethereum, a Solana, et cetera, where they're already used to some of these other trust assumption questions, because the Bitcoin holders just won't accept those same trade-offs. That's number one. You only have to go trust Bitcoin. The next question that a lot of these folks ask is, okay, where does the yield come from? How do I understand the yield? And this is where dual staking is so important. Core has a 81-year emission cycle. So it's a very gradual decrease. And that's very unique amongst pretty much every crypto asset, because Core was originally designed to be a second block reward for Bitcoin, meaning that the 75% of the Bitcoin hash rate that's currently delegating to Core will continue to receive those rewards, and it helps them cover their operational expenses, and it helps keep the Bitcoin ecosystem, secure and decentralized. But that emissions curve is also where the yield comes from, because it's the same yield in both places, where we're paying out just core tokens. There's a finite amount of core tokens of 2.1 billion. There's no more printed or decreased based on the amount of Bitcoin or core that comes on. It's fixed. And now with dual staking, you have another demand driver for that core that helps increase that rate. So the way to think about it is you're helping to secure the core chain. If you just use Bitcoin to go do that, you get a lower rate. If you secure the core chain on both the Bitcoin and core side, you earn a higher rate, and you only have to understand the core token. So there's a lot of product development that went into making it so simple. And that's why there's been so much adoption, because it actually is meeting the people where they're at and delivering a product or service that they want.
Got you. Thank you. I know instead of retail users, you mentioned the institutions also started to adopt dual staking. We've previously reported a listed company named DeFi Technology. They launched the Core strategy, which is similar to MicroStrategy's cumulation of BTC. Why do you think this company adopted such a strategy, and how might it help Core's development?
So they've announced Core-Fi. Core-Fi will go live in early Q1, so it's not live yet. But the fact that it's going to be live is a huge testament to the team behind DeFi and their belief in the core ecosystem. And this is one of a number of institutional partnerships like Hashnode and some other folks that have announced public support for dual staking. But the idea here is now people understand Core's yield and the sustainability that much better. Previously, there was always questions of, hey, is that really going to last? Is it going to be true? But now the demand drivers are that much clearer. And what we've seen is these folks are now very excited about this becoming a new utility for the core token. And the way to think about it is now, not only is it staking, gas, governance, and the things on the EVM side, but it's now essentially a way to earn yield in your Bitcoin in perpetuity. And that is a new utility that the core token has, that it applies to Bitcoin, that no one has ever been able to bring forward. And in this idea of these institutions now getting involved is going to help bring that narrative forward, where Core-Fi is going to be doing a MicroStrategy type acquisition play for the core token. And that is going to be primarily in service of this dual staking. And that's going to really continue to power not just this narrative, but the demand for the core token overall, which will be very positive for the shareholders of that entity.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see strategies like this to be being applied in big company. I think that will shape the broader BTC-Fi ecosystem. And institutional adoption has been a key factor in Bitcoin's success. What progress and plans does Core have in terms of institutional cooperation?
So there's been several custodians that have all been announced recently and their support of dual staking. And that's big because it's helping to solve that access problem, where many of these large Bitcoin holders, in order to go stake their Bitcoin, they must do it through one of these custodians. So that access has been really big, and we've named BitGo, Copper, and a few others, and we'll continue to name those as they go live. But it's been a big one for us, where that was one of the historic blockers, and now those blockers are getting cleared up. The other side of the institutional is, can they put a picture together that makes this an appealing strategy? And they're, for each fund out there, for every institution, they've got yield targets in mind. They've got different things that they're concerned about. But what we're seeing is more and more people now saying, hey, I want to go put my Bitcoin to work. I'm not ready for DeFi. Let me go dual stake it. And they're putting that trade on in sides, because now they're essentially getting this yield on top of their Bitcoin. Plus, they've got potentially a venture-like return in the core asset, which makes it appealing for some of these folks that take directional risk. And I think we'll continue to see that narrative propagate as more and more folks not only hear about this trade, but that trade becomes more popular, because it is, one of the best opportunities in all of Bitcoin or Bitcoin DeFi to go put your assets to work and not to take any principal risk on your Bitcoin.
Got you. Yes, as we all know, there are many blockchains, layer 1, layer 2, even layer 3. What do you think are the key metrics for measuring the success of a blockchain? Which data points about Core are you most focused on right now?
This is one of the areas of having like an infrastructure play that's challenging, because you have different metrics that the market cares about that may or may not be like totally correlated to success. Good examples of that is people really care about, TVL and daily active users. Core is easily number one in both of those categories. But based on that, it's not really showing you what ultimately makes your business successful, which is there adoption? And we care a lot more of, are people coming back? Are there projects on Core that are actually having success? Is there a real ecosystem being built here? If you just focus on the vanity metrics, you wind up, unfortunately, like many of these Bitcoin scaling solutions that are ghost chains. And we tell people, pretty frequently, go look at the block explorers of many of these ecosystems, and you can see that they're not really doing anything. There's no real transaction volume or activity, but they have a high TVL maybe. And that's why it's important to look at all of these different things in aggregate, because these things can be forged, they can be faked. But if you actually go into it, is there actual activity occurring on these? And that's what we care about. We care about product market fit, and we've taken a very different approach than most blockchains that are more research driven than product driven. But it's been pretty successful thus far, and we'll continue to use that approach to go out there and scale our ecosystem into 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, totally agree. We should create a product that meets users' needs. Yeah, and also congrats on the big progress that Core has made. I'm also curious, do you know where's your user base primarily located? And how do you drive Core DAO's development through effective community engagement?
Core's community is actually quite diverse. We've got builders more or less everywhere, I think, at this point, which is amazing. The Core Commit program is ongoing, and there's actually a roadshow, I think, through 10 countries that just wrapped up recently. But the idea is to find these, missionary builders versus these, mercenary builders that plague, so much of the Web3 space, and find folks that want to build real businesses on top of Core, because you actually have this very large community that can go help your product become successful. But the unfortunate setup of many of these builders and these other ecosystems is you can build an amazing product, but there's no one actually there to use it. You can't actually make something interesting, right? And that has been this problem with the space for so long, where this is amazing technologist, but there's no product market fit. There's actually no demand for these products. And part of that goes back to the folks that select to work with Core by building on top of the chain, usually have a different ethos. They're usually a lot more long-term oriented, and Core doesn't do grants. We're very unique for like a L1 or even L2 in this case, where there is no grant program. In order to be part of the incentive program for Ignition, you actually have to bring users, bring TVL, but you get paid for the actual value that you bring to the chain, which is much more similar to what you see in Web 2 with like referral programs or spiffs, etc., where it's actually about the value that you bring versus just showing up. And unfortunately, so much of crypto is that just showing up kind of payment cycle, which leads to this parasitic and very short-term build-outs of these ecosystems, which unfortunately has pretty disastrous results. And the Cortoshis are one of the most vibrant, active, rambunctious groups in all of crypto. And they're ultimately, in addition to the builders, what makes all of this successful, right? Like the Core platform itself is just a platform. Obviously, I'm biased, it has amazing technicals and everything else. But without all these other ingredients, you can't get to the health and durability of that ecosystem.
Got you. So at the end of our interview, let's talk about Bitcoin's future. What are your expectations for this? Could you discuss its role and ecosystem development?
For Bitcoin, I think the progress, like in terms of new opcodes and that sort of thing, is going to be slower than people guess. And I think there's many Bitcoin L2s out there that are relying upon opcodes that get put into Bitcoin, and that's a very political and slow-moving process. I of course will support whatever Bitcoin Core merges in at the end of the day, but I do appreciate some of the slow and deliberate nature that goes into that to ensure that ultimately Bitcoin itself remains as secure as possible. Although I do think it's maybe too political of a process. But I think that will be slow. So I don't expect any new opcodes next year. I'd say maybe 2026. I know there's other people that have, conflicting views on that. I do think in parallel, though, we hopefully will get like a BitPM2 or BitPMX that does go live sometime next year on mainnet. So pretty bullish that some group will be able to get that live and get that on mainnet. Super excited about that. And in general, I think we're hopefully going to get to the next phase of product market fit for Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin itself now has totally durable product market fit as a collateral asset. And as a collateral asset, not just for fund institutions, but now for nation states, which is very, very appealing. What Core is trying to push forward is actually the next level of product market fit, which is as a collateral asset for the, let's call it 3 to 4 billion people out there that are unbanked or underbanked. And I think that we will see Bitcoin use a collateral asset on scaling solutions like Core that people borrow against, and then they get stable coins and use as leverage. And I think that's actually the next wave of Bitcoin adoption that gets Bitcoin into billions of holders versus just millions or hundreds of millions of holders. And that's something that we expect to see really kick off in earnest in 2025. But that, again, is a decade-long mission in order to fully realize that. But I think that's how I'd kind of paint maybe the technical pieces and then a little bit of the adoption pieces for Bitcoin over the next year or two.
Yeah, I think so. It's slowly but surely. Thank you, Rich. I think it's an exciting vision, and many in the crypto space are eager to see Bitcoin involved beyond the digital gold. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's a great conversation, and it's clear that Core plays a significant role in unlocking new opportunities for the community.